Well, good morning. Here we are, week 8, the end. And wow, just the way many of you said you've been learning with each other, you have also taught me. And it has been a great 8 weeks. Thank you so much for your participation. But more than that, it's not just about participating, it's the way you've really tossed in there and given of yourselves. And I am, again, as always, very, very grateful. Well, I want to take your summaries and add in my summary. This is probably going to be a slightly longer video VidResponse, but we're going to see here. All right. So as always, I've got my notes, and I know you're going to work with me on this. I tried to group some of these into, or all of them actually, into some um, uh, sections to address what you're talking about. One of the pieces that you've talked about, one of the barriers, is your own self, and of course that's the case. There are a lot of expectations that are placed on us, particularly when we take positions, new positions, we're in positions, because in large part we don't know what exactly is expected of us. Our expectations of ourselves are so much higher than what other people expect of us. And this is why clear position descriptions are so important. Usually what we get is a job description. We want you to do this, and then this, and then this, and then this. That's talking about output. What you really want to look at is what are your outcomes. That's why it's a position description. People make out job descriptions for us and say, hey, this is what we want you to do. But the people that do that are not really looking at the larger, longer term outcomes. And so part of our teaching, part of being a minister or a pastor, whether we're paid or we're unpaid, is to help people understand. That does not mean filling them with head, filling them with theory. And I think I'm going to jump on that again a little bit. This is about theory, but it's not for them. And so we're trying to help teach them and help them see out into the future. Yeah. Okay, I'll leave it at that for now. Keep in mind that people who've been in the church a long time, they are tired, and they have seen a depletion of their resources. They have invested as churches and as member of church. If you're a long timer, your monies have been part of investing in what has not worked. That's all they know, is that they're not getting. Now they can talk about outcome, right? They have output. They want you to have Sunday school. They want you to have youth programs. They want to see more children, that output, but there isn't the outcome. And they can't think in terms of outcome because all they can see is what's immediately in front of them. And then mixed into all of that is that they haven't gotten the outcomes, right? They wanted and focused on output, but they haven't gotten the outcomes. And so that's part of what's driving them, and is part of that. It's part of the fuel that of their fear, right? It's a bit of what is fueling their fears. There is a sense of urgency that is handed to us, and so much of this again is our own urgency, but it is this need for output and immediate outcomes, which don't come, as we know, immediately. And as we look at our own senses of urgency, I want to really push you again about what kind of urgency are you talking about. Urgency can be experiential. It's what's going on there. It's contextual. It's in the here and now. There's also a sociological urgency that's there. We want to see our world differently. We want to see change made. We want to see needs being met, and or we want to see social community changes. That can be part of our urgency as well. Remember, though, that's outcome, and not that urgency, right? Gives us that false sense of, I got to do it now. There's also, for many of us, a theological urgency. It's what is it? I have theological urgency. I want to see this world changed. I want to see that come through every knee bowing. And so, for some of my friends and very few of my colleagues, but you see this right in the more conservative churches, that this urgency is like an end time urgency. It's coming. It's about to be here, and we've got to get. We don't like this language, but this is for some of us. This is underlying without using the language. How are we going to get folks saved? How are we going to get them not just ready, but into this kingdom of this realm of God? How do we overcome this? We've always done it that way. We've tried that already. Again, you've got to have the plan and you've got to build the bridges. We keep talking about techniques. We want to take all these tools that we have in our tool bag and implement them. But that's what's happened for so long. Let's get the right curriculum. Let's do this right. And if we'll just do that, then everything's going to change. But remember, Christian education is not a silo. The church is not meant to be siloed. It's meant to be integrated, and our tools have got to be used in conjunction with all the other tools that are available to us. And quite honestly, as we talk about gathering volunteers, we want to get past that volunteer mindset. If all we're looking for is volunteers, then basically what we're doing is looking for warm breathing bodies. How do we get more warm breathing bodies? And what we want are people that are trainable, people who have some spiritual depth, and at least a modicum of spiritual depth. And I know you don't have those people there yet in many of the cases. That's why we put ourselves, it's where we invest ourselves. So are we going to invest ourselves in the next latest, greatest, I think this is going to work, or I'm going to invest in the children's ministry, and because children are our future, or because that's what people want, that's what I want, that's what I want to see. That I know is a sense of my urgency, a sense of what people are expecting of me, a sense of what I'm expecting of myself. But friends, if you are not building adult leaders, you're never going to have the children. Okay, you might get it in quick output, but you're not going to see that outcome. And when people say to you, we've always done it that way, do your homework on this one. But I can almost guarantee you that unless you're in a very, very small community where the children are still living in town, those people's children your parishioners' children are not still in church. We've got so many unchurched people, so many people who've left the church in droves, so many people who have not made their children go to church because they don't want their children to have to experience what they experienced. And so the folks' grandchildren and great grandchildren are not in church. And so this lets you come back and say, look, what we've been doing, and it's not what you've been doing, it's what we've been doing all these years has not been working. So yes, we've always been doing it this way, but it's not been working. Our children, our grandchildren, our great grandchildren, in some of our cases, are not in church. They're not living these lives that we envisioned for them. They are not grounded spiritually. They're not walking with Jesus. Just look at whatever that may be. And that becomes an impetus for saying, what can we do? It gives you an opportunity to begin to talk about outcomes. Right? We don't have the volunteers we need. We don't have the programs we need. Yes, in part because people have moved away, but in large part because what we've been doing and what we've been always doing has not been working. We have to be careful how we phrase that, because people will take that very personally, particularly if I've been the one in charge. And we can say, we just haven't had the tools available. The tools have not been out there. We haven't been thinking of these ways in generations and generations since maybe the Great Awakening. since the late 1800s, turn of 1900s. Okay, it turned from 1800s into the 1900s, right? Um, where else are we going here? Position descriptions. Let me come back to that. Communication is huge, and Patty brought up this piece about a young person who's on their leadership council, and Patty, you are spot on. We as adults have been abdicating our responsibilities. We are, again, we're tired, and it's when we're used to, when we're called or asked to be volunteers to take on a position. We take a position, and it's a lifetime sentence is what it's become. So I'm more than happy and more than ready to abdicate. And I also want to abdicate because I haven't seen a lot of fruit, because I had urgency, because I had self expectations that I wasn't able to meet. And this is where having somebody who's able to step up to take and be in charge, whether you're paid staff or, again, because you are in a leadership position, this is why it's so hard to cheer and to encourage. I think I'll say this again a little bit, but this really is my my mission statement: is equip, empower, encourage. Equip, empower, encourage, and that's how I see my ministry. That's how I move. I'm going to equip you. I want to empower you to use these tools, these things that you've been equipped with, to pick and to choose, and then my personal work is encouraging people, is saying, yeah, look, it's working, is to come and to follow up, and to point out how it's working, and to give you those attaboys and attagirls as you go along. That's our work, and as we do that, one of the ways to work with gang people is to look at people who really are, as I say, teachable, who really have this heart, and had at one time that drive, even though their fire may have flickered out or flickered down. We want to try to find people who have some positivity within them, maybe not about the church, but again, not encourageable, but we can encourage them in positive ways, and just ask them, would you please make just a 1 year commitment? Could I get, how about a 9 month commitment? Would you walk with me? This is what I can promise I can do for you. Okay. I need someone that brings you to this. Now, I know Rhonda from past has people, and she in her congregation that she has worked with, right, and has walked along with, and has been really good about encouraging. But Rhonda, if I remember this correctly, some of them at least still bring some negativity that gets in the way. So we have to be careful with pick and choosing. Do we have people that are too jaded that we don't want to call on, or people who are too jaded that we bring alongside us in some way, maybe, or perhaps? Okay. Anyways, Patty mentioned this young person, and what we look for in leadership is people with positive experiences, that are teachable, that maybe they're able to think at that theoretical level, but are not so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good, as my husband would say. We're looking for spiritual and experiential folks. There was a movement, and perhaps it's still codified in your bylaws, where it's something that still is practiced, that we want to get youth onto our boards. That used to be part of the bylaws. Christian churches, disciples of Christ youth. The major problem with that is they do not bring the knowledge, the training, uh, um, to weigh in on decisions, right? Church is a business, whether you like it or not. Church is a business. Many of our churches, in fact, even our smallest churches, many of you are working with endowments or monies in the bank that equal or rival or are more than many small businesses. In some cases, in some towns, most small businesses. You are talking about a lot of money, and if you don't think that you need to employ business practices and principles, you've got a long thing coming. And if you are a minister and you can't read the financial reports, if you don't understand or know financial reports, go and learn them. Go and sit with a banker or an accountant in your community and learn it so that you're able to give good guidance and good input. That's something that a 19-year-old cannot bring and weigh in on. All they're bringing then is their opinion, and we'll defer to them. What do you think, Johnny? What do you think, Jane? Okay, no, it's not about what they think. We need experience and good experience. Again, this is part of what has hurt us in the church. Um, where else? Unpaid staff, volunteers. When we talk about people, um, see if missionary language may work for them. Missionary is helping people. When it comes to Christian education, it's helping grow people in their faith. Being a missionary is what you bring, how you can help them along. Some tricks. Um, okay. Think about Maslow. Do you remember Maslow hierarchy of needs? That you've got security, safety, or security, safety, belonging, and then you get to self-esteem and self-actualization. When I think about this in the church and for churches, a lot of our churches are run down, or we're in neighborhoods that were once very safe and now are no longer safe, and so they are well, they're dealing with safety issues. But you've also got leaking roofs, you've got monies that can't support taking care of your people and the like. So you've got basic needs, right? So basic needs in churches are not being met. And for so many of us in these just financially depleted congregations, we're not going to get past that. There's a sense of urgency for you. Then you get to security. Is my building safe? Is it secure, right? What about my home? What about my neighborhood? Can I feel comfortable going there at any time of the day? More and more of us are locking down our churches. It just pains me that we lock down churches and put in security cameras during Sunday services. I I hear you. I understand all of that, but there's got to be another way. And if you want to talk about that, we can consult in that direction. It is not necessary. There are other ways of doing that. So security. As I get older, as people get older, we don't like driving at night, right? And so my own safety is being is in question there, and that bothers me, right? Because what does that say? I have to deal with my own mortality, with my own aging, when I can't feel secure with myself. That's coloring how I see and do church, what I bring to church, what I bring to leadership, what I bring to making decisions. We've got the belonging and the hospitality part that goes in there. How are we helping in our relationships? And if I don't feel like my church is a safe place, if I'm so overrun with what has to be done, then I don't know that I belong to this. I don't know if I want to belong to this. I don't know if I want other people to belong to all of this. And I come in and I see the way things are looking. I see the peeling paint. I know I may not see them. The cobwebs, the toilets that are running, or the stuff that just isn't there. And I don't really want other people to be there. And quite honestly, I want to get in and out of church. I'm only there because I have to be, out of necessity. I'm not going to build relationships. My self esteem, then, without relationships, is seriously compromised, and respect for myself, confidence in myself, my ability to have purpose. What is my purpose? I go to church, but really, what is my purpose, both within the church? What is my part, and outside the church? So, as a leader, you then have the opportunity for people to build their purpose, to speak out purpose, to call out call. Okay, that's a lost art in ministry, is to call out call to see Jesus and what Jesus is wanting people to do, to seeing whom God has created people to be, calling that out, speaking to them in those uh, in those just foundationally important ways. James, you mentioned, and others have picked up on this about spiritual growth being unchartable. And I will say, yes, it is unchartable, but then again, it isn't. There are marks of spiritual maturity, there are ways that we can measure. See, think of it as a barometer or a thermometer, thermometer, thermometer of spiritual health. When I see people acting out, when I see them being mean and ugly, when I see leadership completely compromised, when I hear there's an edge to people, a snarkiness to people, and how they relate to other people, then I know the spiritual maturity either isn't there or it's compromised. That's what part of what I want to encourage you to see. There's intentionality about that as well, and there's this huge discernment piece, right? God works differently in each one of us, but if I, as an educator, a Christian educator, as a minister responsible for the faith and educational development of people, don't have a sense of where people are going, as growing people to be disciples, as growing people right as into their self-actualization. And if I haven't said this, I have got to. And if I have said, I've got to say it again. Self-actualization in Maslow is being all that God has created us to be and to doing what Jesus needs and wants us to do, right? So we're putting that in. If I don't have a mechanism for helping people to get there, then I'm nowhere. And that's one of the reasons I love the personal ministry assessment. It opens up the conversation. It gives me a sense of where people are, and then knowing where they need to be, and where they need to be is being all that they can be. And I know some of the steps that's going to take, some of those growth pieces. Not everything. It's not check off the box, right? That's, we started several weeks ago. It's not checking off the box. It's a self check-in. Let's see, where else? Um, Heady churches. James, you speak so well to this. Heady churches. A lot of you are in these heady churches, churches based in principles. The question I could bring back to you is, what principles are you based in as a church? They can be theological, and they need to be theological. What is it Scripture saying to us? That's what dictates what our outcomes are, the long term outcomes. So asking those principles. It's not in the short run, but what is driving you? What drives me is that God has created each one of us and has a plan for our lives. I'm not going to tell you what that plan is, but I'm going to give you the tools, right? I'm going to give you the tools that allow you to be in relationship with God, so that together you can discern that, and in relationship with God, but also then an accountability, a system for where I can come back and ask you every year. It's part of the yeah, spiritual gifts inventories were about output. Let me talk to you about where you are. Personal ministry assessments are being used for output. Where can I place you? Where can I tell you? But they're really designed. The personal ministry assessment is designed to help people figure out what God's calling them to do, both mission that's in the community and ministry within the congregation. What is that? And it's not just finding a volunteer and filling a slot. It's helping to give possibilities to people and allowing them to choose. I see that this could be possibilities, but this is really, where your experience lends itself. This is what's available now. But I told a man one time, and this was before I used a personal ministry assessment, but we had to do an intervention with two of the deacons in our congregation because of the meanness and ugliness. I say we, it was the chair of the elders and the chair of the board. We sat down and had this I don't know, come to Jesus meeting, and just told them that year that they were not going to be returned to the deacon board, and told them this is why. We use the fruits of the Spirit and the ugly, rotty fruit out of Galatians. And we said, these are the fruits of the Spirit, and this is the rotty, fleshy fruit. And you are displaying more of this rotty, fleshy fruit than you are of the spiritual, of the spirit, the fruit of the Spirit. I mean, we're looking for the fruit in you, and we're not finding it because you've got some of this fleshy stuff. And Robert, you are so called to deaconhood, and this is why. And Dawn, we see these gifts to be an elder in you. You have the gifts. We want you to be an elder, but you can't because you don't have the fruit. You are so mired in your rotty, fleshy stuff. And the meanness and the ugliness that you are bringing into this church is not acceptable. And we are not going to keep you in this deacon position. And these are ways, though, that we want to help you and be available to you. Now, of course, even though it was the chair of the elders and the chair of the board that were speaking, it was the minister's fault. And they left yelling and screaming. And you know what? It was a small town, and that was okay. And as soon as the minister left, the two came back. There were four because they brought their wives with them, of course. And the one was moved into, they reinstated the one as a deacon. The other was instated as an elder that year. And their rotty, fleshy crap shit just ran all over that church, and 15 years later the church died and it closed. Serious stuff, folks. This is serious stuff. That church looked at output. They were desperate. They needed volunteers. They needed these people there. They looked at output, not the outcome, and what would happen with that kind of leadership. Right? Remember Maxwell's law of the lid. If you're a leader 3 or operating at a leader 3 or a 5, people aren't going to stay there. Those people that were mature in their faith, they left that church and went to other churches. Outcomes. What do we theologically, not just in principles, what do we want to be theologically? A lot of us are caught up. Our churches focus on we're this or we're that. And a lot of our socially progressive, and I really don't like that word. Those of us that are in progressive churches, I don't like that because it suggests that if we're not progressive, then we're regressive, right? If we're not progressing, we're regressing. And that becomes, talk about judgment statements, that becomes a judgment statement. It also suggests that where you are isn't where you're progressing to be, and you're just not progressing. Yeah, when you look at folks and their theology, they believe in that. Again, every church I was called to pastor in, there were people who left up until about 10 years ago. People left because they didn't believe women should be in ministry. And what I figured was I have evidence for otherwise. Both I'm so clear about call and my relationship with Christ, and a few other things. I can do this theologically, scripturally as well. But I really appreciated and respected. I really appreciated they had the courage of their convictions, and they could ground themselves theologically. It's not where I am, but I had to respect that. And it's not that they were regressive, it's just that they read and understood scripture differently than us. That being said, a lot of us in socially progressive churches, and and even those in other in the our more conservative churches, okay, we get based around issues, and you know what the hot button political issues are. And I'm thinking, you could bear me out wrong on this one, but I'm thinking that for so many of us, what our arguments are and what we're pinning back and forth against people are issues that are political, right? This is another way that we're bringing us and our society in, and so we get caught up in those pieces, and that's what our focus is. These are outcomes, and these outcomes, right, outcomes are because of what we are focusing on in the church. You want to change the world, friends. You've got to change the spirit. And this Christian education and leader development is where that goes. And we can't argue an outcome, we have to create the outcomes. All right. Um, okay. Fixing the church, senses of urgency, fixing the church. Let's go there for another moment. This isn't about fixing the church. People call us, they call a minister or a staff person, they're calling Jesus. Of course, we have to remind them that we are not a savior. He came and he died, and his spirit is here to advocate for us, to comfort us, to give us what we need. We need to be reminded of that as well. Churches want us to come in and fix things. They want Band-Aid, right? They want us to come in and do to give them band-aids, and what they see is bleeding. And for a long time, I said, the problem is we have slow bleeds, right? That people have these slow bleeds, and it's going to take stitches, not a band-aid, and it's going to take Neosporin and all of that. Maybe in some cases, something much more, penicillin or something deeper than that. One of my mentors, though, pointed out that he said, Chris, you don't have a slow bleed, they're hemorrhaging. And I realized, yeah, they're hemorrhaging. And even worse than that, they're bleeding out. And so people want a Band-Aid, and we come in with transfusions. And for some of them, well, churches need transfusions, right? And for many of them, that transfusion comes because they need radical surgery if it's not too late. And I know those of us that love the church, we do not want to think it's too late. But I remember distinctly going to 3 churches, and I call myself a person of hope. And when I was in regional ministry, I always saw my role as, or part of my role, is bringing hope. Let me help you build the bridge. I have hope. And I remember the first time I left a church and called Bill. My Bill. I always we call each other when we're leaving wherever it is we are and heading towards home, whether we're home or not, or wherever our home is for that particular day. I remember calling him and crying because I had no hope to give that congregation. It was too late, and I had 3 of those different times in the 9 years I worked in the regional ministry, where all I could do was cry because I could not figure out the hope, and there was nothing to give them in terms of output, outcome, and as I couldn't even come without to output for them. So it's easier to put a Band-Aid on, it's quicker, and that's what people want. But your job is to look for where the hemorrhaging is coming from and to start to transfuse with the spirit, and start your transfusions there. Build it as quickly as you can, and then with that, keep looking at what what kind of fluid, right, you're going to need in those transfusion bags, right? It's not just about the what's it called? About the water, if you will, the rehydrating. It's about that blood and what that life blood is going to look like. Um, with that, then people are looking to be fed. You all have mentioned that they are hungry out in our communities, but they're also hungry in our churches. And uh, if you'll give them what they're hungry for, you'll see you'll see people just you might be one or two are going to jump whose eyes are going to light up. Those are the folks that you can build on. Go in there, talk the spirit stuff, right? Bring the spiritual piece in with you. Look for the eyes that light up. Words lie, they can betray us. It's the eyes that we can build on and build with. Some of the places to get started, and say once again, what I've given you is a lot of theory and a lot of tools. There, so often, I think talked about this last week. People want to take and go, "Hey, I'm going to use this tool and apply that tool," and hey, here's the best and the neatest, and here's one, and oh, Cokesbury came out with this, and here's Abington and Lifeway, and hey, here's a great book we could use for a book study that Chalice has just put out. Um, uh, Stop jumping around. Get intentional. This is all about intentionality, getting a plan. And I know that you are overwhelmed. I know that you're not sure where to start, that you have a paper to write. Take some time to just step back. And I know this is a hard time of the year to do that, but you got to do it, right? And just think, after next week, it's done. Do the best that you can. But get on your calendar a retreat time for you, maybe in February before Lent comes, before Lent starts, end of January. Give yourself some time. Write it in. It may be that you need to hold on to taking a course. I have one of my mentees, clients, actually, that I coach, who has taken a session off without taking any courses, so that he could breathe and step back and just assimilate what all he had. Maybe we should have a course just called assimilation, where you can take it and assimilate assimilate your information. So take that time out, work on the intentionality. Um, Easy ways to get started: get an accountability partner and ask them, and get them to ask you every single week, what did you read in scripture this past week that attacked you, confused you, excited you, or scared you? Do that. Keep doing that. Do it in your meetings with people. When you have a Christian Ed meeting, when you have a leadership meeting, when you have board meetings, when you have elders meetings, just tell them you're going to ask this question, and put them in groups of 4 or 3. Don't do it as a whole group exercise, because you want them to do that. If you have less than 4, they're going to get caught up in talking and not doing it. Go around. What did you read in scripture this past week? Ask it over and over and over again. And you're going to find, after about 3 times of doing that, they're going to be ready for that question. Ask your leaders every meeting. Don't tell them we're going to do this. Just go around the table and do it. And some are going to, I didn't read anything. Okay, cool. Do it again the next month. Put it on your calendar to remind yourself. Make it as a note in your calendar for that next meeting. In my spiritual habits class, I'm going to teach you another way of praying with them. And so we can go, we'll talk about that then. It's 1-2-1 or 1-2-3. I think I'm going to change the title to 1-2-3 praying, but we'll go there and talk about that. That different time, intentionality, we've got it. Depleted resources, people are looking to be fed. Baby steps, you've said it in there in the forums. Get a plan, be intentional, keep growing yourself spiritually. We are never spiritually, we've never made it. Even, when we looked at Bobby Clinton's work and getting to that afterglow stage, it's not that place or that time where we stop growing. Even Bill E., who just turned 80 years old and thinks he's retired, he is doing check-ins with his partner. All of us. I'm 21 years younger than he is, and yet we still do regular check-ins with one another. Um, you ask the question, or you're some of you are saying, "I'm not sure what to do next." Remember that we are human beings, not human doings. And it's the same when it comes to the church. The church has to learn how to be, not merely to do. And there is urgency, and there is so much to do, and there is so much pain and hurt. So you're going to have to do this at parallel times. And as I said last week, bivocational ministry is absolutely hell. We need to partner with others, bring them along with us. What are my strengths? What do I bring? I'm looking for those lit up eyes, and what can they bring together with me that we can do something whole, that we can fractal together in? Get those fractals started. Retreat, get take time, find that time, make it happen. Your own spiritual time, evening, day. People are hungry. Obviously, you are hungry. It said, "Don't let the bastards get you down." Well, Don't let them steal your joy. Don't let them put your fire out. Stay in there. If you're not being transfused, and when they suck it out of you, and this friend of mine called it straw. They said there are straw people. They suck the lifeblood out of you. When you've got people sucking your lifeblood, you've got to be in you've got to have those wise people. You've got to have your mentors. You've got to have those that are cheering you on, who are your cheerleaders. That's it. I'm wrapping it up. As we wrap up this course, thank you so much. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for trusting one another. Thank you for putting yourselves out there. Thank you for being open to growing, for being teachable. Some of you I will get to see in next courses. I look forward to that. Y'all are awesome. I just need to say it over and over again. We have a high quality of students in our MTP program. You are those students, and just thank you so much. I'll see you more. Some of you are getting ready to graduate. I will see you at graduation, and take great delight in walking with you. All right. Thank you. Take care. Bye bye.